So we'll begin our sermon for Rosh Hashanah in this Unitarian Universalist congregation while our children are celebrating Halloween downstairs with a 4th century Buddhist parable. It's actually called a koan in Japanese, which also means a teaching story, as parable does. Koans are traditionally pretty spare in details, but I confess I have added a few embellishments in honor of my storytelling Jewish ancestors, my grandmother in particular, who lived by the saying that all stories are true and some of them actually happened. She told the most wonderful stories about things as if they were facts, which I later found out they were absolutely not. So the koan goes like this. A monk, or in some versions of this story, just a man, was walking in a wilderness when he met a tiger. True to both of their natures, the monk ran for his life, and the tiger chased him. The monk, unbeknownst to him, ran straight in the direction of a very steep cliff, and when he got to the very edge, the tiger close behind, the monk, in desperation, caught hold of a sturdy root of a wild vine growing right at the edge and swung himself over. While the monk hung perilously from the vine over the edge of the cliff, the tiger paced back and forth just above, waiting to eat him should the monk try to climb back up. The monk looked down and saw far below him the jagged rocks at the bottom of the cliff waiting for him should he let go. And as if matters weren't bad enough, 2 mice appeared and began nibbling away at the vine. So hanging from the vine between the deadly tiger above and the deadly rocks below, with mice nibbling away at his lifeline, the monk noticed one tiny, perfectly ripe, wild strawberry growing from the cliff near where he hung, like a tiny red jewel. And grasping the vine with one hand and using all his strength, the monk reached out, carefully picked that tiny strawberry, and put it into his mouth. How sweet it tasted. The end. I have always found this koan so perplexing, which is the point of koans, I understand, but I also find this one a little irritating, actually. How can the story just end there? With the monk hanging from a vine, chewing one tiny little strawberry without telling us what happens. Talk about a cliffhanger, right? It actually made me wonder, is that the original cliffhanger story? Maybe this is where that expression comes from. I want to know how it ends. Does the tiger eventually lose interest and give up? Does the monk scare away the mice at least? Does someone come along and save him before his arms give out? And let's be real. How could anyone care about a wild strawberry at a time like that? Is that the lesson we're supposed to come away with? Eat strawberries in the face of impending doom, rather than trying to do something to save yourself? But what if there's nothing you can do to save yourself? Is that when you eat the strawberry? Well, as in Jewish tradition, Buddhist teachers have debated and interpreted this story for centuries, and there's never just one lesson. But one of the lessons that I think this story teaches, as so many Buddhist stories do, is that life is precarious. It is fragile and impermanent and sometimes dangerous, and strawberries still matter. Abby, can you just close that door for me? Thank you. Strawberries still matter. We all find ourselves hanging from metaphorical vines, if not literal ones, at times in our lives. You may be hanging from one of those vines at this very moment. And at this moment, it feels like our country, even our entire world, is hanging from one too. Tigers above, jagged rocks below, mice gnawing, and there are no good endings in sight. But one of the hard and beautiful lessons of that koan, I believe, is that even when we are hanging by a thread, even when we are distracted and worried, even when we are afraid for very good reasons, because hungry tigers and jagged rocks are real, even when we are filled with a deep sense of doom and despair, there's a ripe strawberry growing by our hand. There is sweetness at hand, but the only way to experience it is to gather all of our strength and reach out. We have to notice the strawberry first, and then we have to reach out for it. We have to pick it. The monk has to risk something for that strawberry. He has to use all of his strength to reach it, which may seem like a questionable choice, actually, when you're hanging from a vine. But here's the thing, it isn't. Because maybe, especially when we are hanging on by a thread, especially then, we have to reach out for sweetness. We have to taste it. In the Jewish liturgical year, we are in the middle of the days of awe, those 10 days of reflection between two of the holiest days in the Jewish calendar, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, which begins Friday night. And the tradition, the story, is that on Rosh Hashanah, God opens these giant books of life and death. And over the next 10 days, God inscribes everyone's name in one of the books. And we can influence which book our name will be written in by engaging in sincere acts of reconciliation. We can inscribe ourselves in the book of life for the coming year by seeking to make amends for the wrongs we've done in the past year. Now, even if one doesn't take the story of the books of life and death literally, and I think most Jews do not take it literally, it's still a serious time of year. It's a contemplative time of year. It is a time for what in Hebrew is called teshuvah, which literally means returning to oneself. Though some believe, and I am among them, that teshuvah isn't so much returning to something as turning toward something. Turning toward our truest selves, turning toward our most whole, authentic, and joyful selves. So the work of the new year is to do a kind of emotional or spiritual accounting, to reflect on the year that has just gone by and to reckon with anything we may have said or done that caused pain to another person, to ask ourselves those hard questions. Is there healing to be attended to this year? Is there anything that can be mended, that needs to be mended? It is humbling work, and it is not always possible. We may not be ready, or the time is not yet right, but there's almost always something we can mend. Some tiny stitches to be made, some kind of turning to be done. I'm going to talk more about that next week, the humble and difficult work of repair and restoration. But there's another part of Rosh Hashanah that I find I am so drawn to these last few years, and that is sweetness. Maybe because I'm getting older. Maybe because the news of the world is so hard. The stakes in our country are so high right now, with the election 1 month away. We're hanging from the proverbial vine. So we need to talk about sweetness. We need to talk about apples and honey, maybe especially about honey. Dory Midnight says that there are a lot of reasons to talk about honey at this time of year. She writes, "Did you know that honey is a wound healer? Made from the love affair between bees and flowers, sunlight and earth. And did you know that honey is antimicrobial? It actually repairs tissues, so it makes for a perfect ally for this time of year when we bring our loving attention to what hurts, to what has been torn, and to what might turn bitter if not tended to with care. This is the season in which we spend time reflecting on where we've missed the mark, both personally and collectively. And so let's pour a little honey over everything we do," she says. Let's offer honey to the hurt places, the tender parts. Let's drip honey on the paths of teshuvah, returning. How do we do that? I'm imagining us all going home and dripping honey all over our houses and our bodies. How do we offer sweetness to the hurt and tender parts? How do we taste it even as we dangle from the precipice? How do we claim it when life seems anything but sweet? The koan tells us that first we have to pay attention. We have to stop and look for sweetness, because sweetness is often tiny, quiet, overshadowed by other bigger and louder things. The 13th century poet Rumi writes, "Keep knocking, and the joy inside will eventually open a window and look out to see who's there." Kids are really good for this. They keep knocking on that door behind which sweetness is waiting. My nephew Miles is 16 months old, and I have been spending time with him just about every week since he was born. But the last month has been too busy. The new church year and weddings and memorial services and so many things starting up, and I just couldn't get there. And this past week, I realized that my afternoons with Miles are at least as much for my own well-being as they are for giving his dad, my youngest brother, a few hours off. I realized I need the sweetness of that baby's company to tend to my own soul. I need time for him so that I can be as well as possible for you. So I went. Well, Miles has started walking in the month since I saw him. He has about 5 steps now before he loses his balance. And during those steps, he looks like this adorable cowboy who has spent way too long in the saddle. And his own amazement that he can walk is still there. It is a surprise to him every single time. He also learned to blow kisses in the past month, and the sweetness of it is truly beyond words. Church is a really good place for noticing sweetness. 2 Sundays ago, Penny Bell, who is 3, pointed at my photograph downstairs on the wall, her dad told me, and declared, "That is my favorite talking person." I know. I am Penny's favorite talking person. I don't even know how to fully take in the sweetness of that. But grown-ups offer each other sweetness too. Yesterday we celebrated the life of Jerry Druff here, Cleo and Eric's beloved partner, and I learned that he had a wicked sweet tooth. The lunch after the service was hosted by members of the congregation who brought food and flowers and set everything up so beautifully. And in Jerry's honor, that lunch had the best desserts I think I have ever eaten in my life. There were about 10 different kinds. I did not eat all 10, but there was this giant strawberry and whipped cream cake, which Jerry loved and which looked like it had come straight off of the British Bake Off show. There was so much sweetness in that lunch. Not just in the desserts themselves, of course, but in the love, in the care, in the tenderness that went into their making. Rabbi Rachel Barron-Blatt, who blogs as the Velveteen Rabbi and who you know I love, she's a rabbi in Western Massachusetts, and she's also a beautiful poet and writer, and she sent out a column this week for Rosh Hashanah. And in it, she wrote about how she has realized that so much of what is happening in the world is simply out of her hands. The list of things she cannot fix is so long, so big. From the escalating violence in the Middle East to the impact of Hurricane Helene, and now I'm told there's another one coming. And she wrote, "I cannot fix any of it, so I make challah dough, listening to psalms. I sing and I run the dishwasher and put away the clean, warm plates. I set the table for the new year, literally and metaphorically, and I pray for safety and tranquility and kindness. I pray for all of us to be able to take care of each other." She writes, "Most of us don't have the power to fix the big things that are broken. It is simply not in our hands. But we can fix what we can reach. We can find the next good thing." And so I wish for you sweetness, not just in the year ahead, but in this very afternoon. I want you to go out and look for some. I want you to take time to attend to sweetness, to notice it, to create it however you can, to offer it to someone and receive it back. And I wish for you in the year ahead tenderness with the hurt parts and honey to heal everything that needs healing, that we might be braided back into life once again. Shana Tova.